You're on Team Human, conscious intervention in the machine. An opportunity to challenge the frames, remember the history, recognize the lunacy, laugh when we can, and at least cry together when we can't. We've been through this before, and we'll get through it again. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and I'm on Team Human. Playing for Team Human today, my go-to source of news, information, and daily dose of horror wrapped in enough perspective to make it ridiculous, Jonathan Larsen of The Fucking News. Jonathan and I have been speaking regularly about all the chaos going on out there, and I found myself truly helped by being able to metabolize all this with someone else. So I thought it might be fun to start doing this along with y'all and see what you think. Jonathan Larsen has worked at a ton of great news shows, from Keith Olbermann right through to Chris Hayes. And while he may have been one of the first refugees deported by the mainstream media news corporations, he's found an entirely new and, I'd argue, more influential role as the writer of his own media empire, The Fucking News, currently on Substack as a daily dispatch and audio monologue. I try not to include too much news and current events on Team Human. That's mainly because the podcasts I listen to myself are delightfully free of references to the daily chatter and quick takes around this political media circus or torture chamber as it's become. But so much is going on in our nation and world right now that I thought it might be okay to once a month create a little isolated dip into what the hell is going on around us and try to bring some perspective, some humor, and some humanism to these tragic and ridiculous phenomena. And if it works and it's fun and you find it rewarding, please let me know, and I'm going to try to make a little monthly feature out of these visits. So here's my first regular conversation with my friend, Jonathan Larsen. So, Jonathan, we can do this the easy way or the hard way?
Yeah. Yeah. Ted Cruz just said today that sounds like a mafia boss.
Oh, he even said that?
He just said it
does
today. I was
sound like,
just reading it.
It sounds like a prison guard or yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for people who don't know what that is, that was the head of the FCC on a podcast explaining how they basically threatened ABC to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah. He said, Disney, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And Disney decided to go with the easy way. I'm not sure they think it's so easy now, but that was the course they chose yet again.
Right. And it's got me thinking a lot. And it's part of why I wanted to speak to you. And I'm hoping maybe we could do this as a regular thing, because, most of the Team Human podcasts they're about the world, but they're about the world from an almost artsy mycelial perspective, right? Oh, there's all this stuff going on CNN, but let's metabolize this together, or it's important to have human resiliency in the face of all this stuff. And kind of, there's a little bit of, la, 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 I don't want to listen to that. And it's also because I respect listeners who just want to go to bed and hear a podcast and have their hearts and souls spoken to and not necessarily have to think about Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or anything else. But at the same time, it feels like there's a way of discussing these things. And that's part of what your work at Fucking News has shown me. There's a way to discuss these things. In your case, with humor and irony, that even though we're hearing troubling, scary things, there's a bed of humor and humanness beneath it that doesn't make it okay, but at least I know there's someone else who's pondering the ridiculousness of where we've gotten.
Well, thank you. Yeah, for one reason or another, a lot of projects that I've been involved with, going all the way back as far as Air America Radio, I tell the story all the time of how we got an email from a listener who just said, "You make me feel sane." And I think that, I spent most of my career on the inside of corporate media, MSNBC, CNN, a bunch of places. And so I'm sort of used to seeing the frames in which stories and of the day are processed in a way that I like to think I challenged as much as I could when I was there, but also I don't have to honor now. And so I can bring in whatever contextual details or past framing or past incidents I want to, both to sort of remind people. It's funny. It's hard to talk about the horrors of today and try to reassure people, hey, it's okay. Things were also horrible then, you know? Right?
Well, that's why Jews go to temple. We read in this book, it's like, oh my God, they had it bad.
Right. Right.
These...
Yeah, it's a weird form of assurance to say, honest, guys, things have always been terrible. Like even just today, I'll give you a couple examples. One was, I don't know if it's happened, but ABC was reporting that a U.S. attorney was going to be fired for not bringing ginned up charges against the New York State Attorney General. And,
Right.
and part of my coverage, which ABC did not mention, was that, hey guys, look, George W. Bush got rid of half a dozen U.S. attorneys for not bringing ginned up charges on voter fraud. So it's fine.
Right.
And it's not to say that it's okay. It's to say that we survived. Right? It's to say that we actually went through these things. Yes, these things happen, but that doesn't end with, jackboots on Main Street, just jackboots at immigrant detention centers, right? It's trying to put things in perspective so that people go, oh, okay, this is something that we as a species and we as a nation actually have grappled with before. We've seen this and got through it and thought we had left it in the past. So my aspiration
or left it in the developing world, or
well,
somewhere else.
Yeah. We're doing market studies. Yeah, exactly. But to sort of let people know we've come through other horrible things, and therefore, the thing that makes me nuts on the left is, well, this is fascism. No, buddy. How about that? How about we don't have to declare it a binary? You can say this is more fascistic than it was yesterday, and we can all go, okay, good point. Let's fight that. But once you say this is fascism, this is authoritarianism, you're putting up the score on the billboard and you're saying, okay, go home. Like, no, let's not do that.
Right. I mean, it's interesting how so many things can happen to, George Stephanopoulos and 60 Minutes and whatever. But when it finally happens to like Colbert, it's like, well, maybe kind of blurred the line. He was going to get fired anyway. But then Kimmel, it was so direct that something about Kimmel does sort of register on the fascism meter, if you will, a little bit differently, because there was a clarity to it of here is, I mean, because what fascism really is, at least in Mussolini fascism, is that government corporate collusion where corporations end up supporting sort of government demagoguery.
Right.
So. And I think, okay, so here we are. The government says your deal in your regulated industry won't go through unless you support Daddy. And they go, okay, we support Daddy. And people who have $1 zillion, like, Larry Ellison or Larry Ellison's son, go, okay, I'll support Daddy. And now you'll let me buy this and then buy that and buy this. And we get this big oligarch-owned media space. So it's like, okay, so I can see then from the outside, that's like, oh, I don't like that. And that sort of has a Mussolini flavor to it. But then I think people like you and me, so we'll get off corporate media. So if corporate media is going to be sold out and it's still America and we're still free, so we'll fight against corporate monopoly ownership of stuff the best we can, and FCC doing what they do, but we'll avoid corporate media for publishing. And sure, we'll lose reach if we can't go on YouTube or Substack, once those are corporate media too, because Substack's, Mark Andreessen and his crazy crowd, and YouTube is Google, and they're eating dinner at the White House, so they're all in there. But there's all these little ones. There's Beehive and little things that we can do and all small outliers. But then you're with the small outliers, so you're writing for who? In These Times and The Nation and these other. But once they're so small an outlier, then they get tagged as, oh, these are terrorism-supporting publications. Or are you donating to The Nation? Do you have a history? We're going to look, it gets McCarthyite. Then people are afraid to be donating. Oh, look, you've got a subscription to, the Progressive Times. Oh, but that was back in 2012 before So then you go, okay, so we leave that. So we'll go underground then. Then we go into pirate radio, until they stop pirate. Then we do live meetings and that's so Team Human. We'll have live meetings in our neighborhoods of people so we can actually talk about what's really going on. But then maybe there's someone at the live meeting who's not really one of us, who's going to tattle on us or is going to get us all whipped up into a fury. So we do something that gets us in trouble. And that's the hard way, right? That's the hard way, but that may be the way. That's the Maria Ressa, how to stand up to a dictator. Not that to say Trump's even a dictator, but you stand up the same way now as you would if they were.
I mean, I have many things to say. One is like people going nuts over Kimmel getting indefinitely suspended. I try not to sound like an ass when I say this, but I kind of want to be like, guys, just so we're clear, these are not platforms that were bringing us radical progressive advocacy, right?
Right.
They didn't hire, someone radical to challenge the system, right? These were inherently...
No, they hired milquetoast comedians to roast whatever was going on in our world.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the case, and I'm not sure I agree with this case, but you could make the case that the nature of the ribbing, right, which was typically things like, look how orange she is, right? Ooh, how bold. It is normalizing, is sort of like granting Trump a status as, oh, yeah, we make fun of everyone. And by the way, they do, right? They do make fun of whoever is president at the time. So, but they certainly are not out there advocating for anything like massive change that would make life better for the majority of humans. So it's
Kimmel did some stuff, I don't know that it was even all correct, but he was, trying to make more political points about kids and healthcare and vaccines and
yes, that's absolutely true. But also none of that's radical. That's what we had a year ago, for the most part.
But in the current environment, it's too much.
Of course. The other thing I would say, though, is that I do think you're right that Kimmel hit in a way that was very recognizable to people. FCC chair makes a threat. Disney caves and benches the guy. But the process is actually not, I would say, not an authoritarian one. He made a threat, but the weapon that the FCC chair Brendan Carr had was that companies that owned stations affiliated with ABC, they had mergers in the pipeline that the FCC had to approve, just like we saw with CBS and Paramount.
Right.
So really, he was threatening them, and then they spoke up to ABC and said, "We're pulling Kimmel off the air." And ABC, of course, can't lose massive
Right.
numbers of those stations because
Right. You're
that's
going to take
a source of ad
400
revenue.
stations. Right. You're going to take
Right.
400 stations. Are going to
Right.
not air your evening programming. You're fucked. But those 400 stations, it wasn't like grassroots 400 stations
Of
speaking
course.
for the
Yeah.
consumer. It
Right.
was like, some Koch brother equivalent dudes owning a zillion stations
Yeah,
who want FCC
Nexstar
approval
and
for their
Sinclair
thing.
all of these groups are owned by very conservative guys who have no trouble airing their political views on their licensed programming. But, Kimmel, that's not okay. But a real authoritarian, right, on January 21st would have walked into ABC, CBS, NBC and just taken over the place. So we're still several steps removed from actual classical, tyrannical control of the media. They are using the tools that for good and for ill were set up and put in place and were manipulable in this way. An FCC commissioner, the last remaining Democrat, just said this week, or last week, I guess, that Carr violated the law, the Communications Act of 1934, by doing this. But the law is, sufficiently vague. It just says, stations have to be operating in the public interest. Okay, well, that's pretty easy to claim you are and claim you aren't. So they're still sort of playing with the tools, I think. And
Yeah,
I
well,
think
that's the
that's
whole
worth
problem with
recognizing.
law. Right. I mean, I guess what I'd rather have an authoritarian using loopholes in the law about emergency actions than just doing it
Right.
without.
Right. Yes.
But I mean,
it gets done either way.
It gets done either way. I mean, and I guess the one problem with it is it feels the submission. It feels like the suggestion is, and it goes all the way back. We were talking about this together, I think, a couple weeks ago. It goes all the way back to Al Gore conceding the election. Al Gore believes he won. The New York Times knows later. We did all the counts. By every way you count it, he won Florida. But Al Gore believed that the law, like the courts, the law, and the system itself couldn't withstand the stress of that electoral fight.
Yes.
It can't. So the minute people in government, the minute the Democrats said, no, American democracy itself is not strong enough to maintain democracy, was the minute I think it was lost. The minute even the Democratic Party said, we can't afford a Bernie Sanders, are going to do whatever we can as a party through superdelegates and whatever systems to prevent this, was the minute they're saying we don't think the system will hold. And when you have that much doubt in it, it seems to me it's the same as we could do this the easy way or the hard way. Well, if ABC, whoever is there, if Bob Iger, who fought DeSantis or whoever it was in Florida back when and was willing to risk Mickey on the trans community and all, if he had said, all right, we're a big motherfucking branded corporation with mouse ears. Let's do it the hard way, buddy. Let's do it. Let's go for it. I mean, I still feel like America has enough remaining judges and people and systems and stuff. Most of the folks who've stood up, who've sued and said no, they've been winning.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I do think there's an interesting difference in the examples you gave of Democrats not having faith in the system. I suspect the subtext of Gore in 2000 saying, the center cannot hold if I maintain this fight. My guess is that to some extent that was premised on an understanding that Republicans would exact too high a price, that they would not be willing to take the loss. In the case of Bernie Sanders, and I would argue now with Zoran Mamdani, that's not the case anymore. They're sort of doing it to themselves. And I actually think that the Mamdani situation is really absolutely undercuts the credibility that Democratic leaders would want to have when they say, we honor democracy, right? We oppose Donald Trump because he's a threat to democracy. And they but then explain to me how you can't come out and endorse the people who won your own party's democratic process. How is it
Right.
that you don't endorse that democratic outcome? So
Yeah.
I think they're actually making a bigger, more dangerous bet on Mamdani or against Mamdani than they realize, jeopardizing the vote blue no matter who stuff, along with a bunch of other things. I'm not sure I addressed exactly where you wanted me to go with that, however, but I do think
But well, that was another, right? So there's really two issues here. I mean,
many.
one is suggesting that the people are, I mean, there's three issues here. I mean, people are prematurely capitulating to their imagined fascist dictator, for one. And as you're saying, this is not, we're not there yet. This is something else, even though everyone's saying, this is the day we cross the line. This is the day we're,
Yeah,
Kimmel,
right.
Kimmel is
Yeah.
the day, that's the day, we cross the line. Even though that on the one hand, and we're saying that one should stand up whether or not, they think there's a fascist dictator. You stand up. You stand up. You speak
do the
your
right
truth.
thing.
Right. I just want to say you're welcome to the thousands of listeners who phoned, emailed, or written in to express your appreciation for Kobe dryer sheets. I know they've changed your lives and you just don't know how to respond. Really, you don't need to do anything more than use them instead of those plastic, chemical-filled, evil, and demonically possessed dryer sheets of the others. Actually, they're not even demonically possessed because they're not organic vessels. Kobe dryer sheets could be possessed if they were so inclined because they are real cotton made lovingly by appropriately compensated labor and renewable energy facilities and completely biodegradable. In a sense, every dryer sheet you buy is being rescued from spiritual attack or other exploitation. You can get a 10% discount by going to KobeDryerSheets.com and using the discount code RUSH10.
I mean, I do think Disney's cases are somewhat interesting in that, okay, there are two main cases that we have with Disney, right? First, Stephanopoulos, now Kimmel. And I think with Stephanopoulos, their position was obviously compromised by the external. I don't even remember what the external pressure was at this point. There's so many things going on, but I think with Stephanopoulos, they probably could have and should have fought successfully just on First Amendment journalism grounds. On the other hand, Stephanopoulos did screw up. And $16 million is a rounding error for Disney. And so my guess is that didn't feel like a huge hill or one worth dying on. I think
Stephanopoulos said, and it was incorrect, that Trump was convicted for rape or sexual assault, and it wasn't that.
No, he said rape.
Right, but it was he was instead legally liable for something. It was a different.
Legally liable for, I believe, sexual assault or something along those lines,
as opposed to convicted of rape, which is a big thing to say. I mean, a big legal difference.
Well, in New York, not everywhere, but in New York, what he did or what he was found liable for having done is not considered rape. But by the dictionary term phrasing of definition of rape, it is forcible penetration. But the problem is that wasn't the legal definition, and Stephanopoulos gave that. But in the Kimmel case, I kind of suspect that if the affiliates weren't an issue, and if Carr just said to Disney, Kimmel said a horrible thing, get him off the air, easy way or hard way, my guess is they would have said no. The problem is they can't stand up to all of those affiliate owners, to the two big conservative companies that own those affiliates. Just from just sheer business standpoint, they cannot lose those stations.
Right. And this is the downside of having a media monopoly. That It's funny, they look so powerful, but they're ultimately not, because they've got to answer to shareholders and this and that.
Yeah, exactly. And not only answer to shareholders, but there are laws about what you must and cannot do in terms of your fiduciary obligations to shareholders. Like, can you do this with your corporation? No, you can't. Your role, as defined by the law, is to make them money. Now, they always seem to find exceptions to that on the right, but I've actually been working in my head on a piece called Too Big to Prevail because we're seeing how from the beginning, even before Trump took office, we've seen one after another rich, famous person, right? Someone who spent their lives accumulating fuck you money and had acquired those incredibly envied positions where people imagine, oh my God, you can do anything you want now. And there they were at Trump's inauguration, kissing his ass. Because it's the money they have is now holding them hostage.
I know,
Because
isn't that funny? It's the amount of money is the liability.
right.
It's like, just have enough. I mean, this was, I keep quoting Torah too much on this show, but it's like God told the Israelites in the desert, he'd rain the manna on them, which was like the food. He's like, eat what you need and move on. Don't hoard it. Don't hoard it. And like the people that hoarded it looked at it the next day and it was all like, horrible
Yay!
worms or something. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
No, it
Right,
was bad.
right,
It was
right.
like, don't hoard the shit.
Yeah.
Don't, there's a kind of an economic obesity here. And then even to think, I mean, I still can't even wrap my head around it that, that Elon Musk is going to get a $1 trillion bonus from
We'll see.
Tesla.
Yeah.
You heard about that?
Yeah.
$1 trillion. And it's like, it's a form of of economic financial obesity that just couldn't to extract that much from the circulatory system of the world. It's weird. It's vampiric bloodletting.
And it's not to their benefit anymore.
Right.
It's not buying them anything. It's burdening them with things that they are now obligated to protect. Zuckerberg, Bezos, you mentioned Elon Musk 4 years ago was the golden boy of hope for climate change, and here we are. It's absolutely crazy. And now we're seeing it with, again, these multimedia, multi-market conglomerates, which, by the way, almost all of them, I believe, used to be their own thing. They've now also, in addition to sprawling throughout the media empires, they've become just cogs in much bigger empires as well.
These are holding companies. Google became Alphabet. Facebook became Meta. ABC became Disney, became God knows what, or the Paramount holding blah, blah. So these are banks. They are no longer media companies in that sense.
And it used to be, ironically, we used to have culturally this negative view of like media titans, right? Going back to Charles Foster Kane,
William Randolph Hearst,
right?
Yeah,
right. But that same autonomy and freedom of will also meant that they took enormous personal pride in these media spaces that they owned, and for the most part, just those media things, right? William Paley and, the legendary owner of CBS, like these guys took very real, the Graham family, Washington Post, right? The Sulzbergers, the New York Times.
Well, Sulzbergers, William Paley, those kind of guys we kind of like, right?
I mean, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, but like a William Randolph Hearst, I mean, the guy,
of course,
worked with fucking Bernays and created, I mean, talk about fascism, worked with government to create propaganda to justify America invading Guatemala to save the banana company from America. Right.
That would be the downside for sure.
But that's as Musso as you can get in collusion between media, corporatism, and government what the fuck? That's
Right.
like British East India Trading Company depending on His Majesty to come rescue the ships with warships when they're invading an island nation.
And look, we have that now. We very clearly have that now in Fox, right?
Right. And soon to be CBS. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's
According to the
looking that
memo.
way.
Yeah.
And of course, a big part of the reason Fox got to be so powerful is because Democrats allowed them back in the 80s to expand beyond what the rules said they could. And so they were able to just sprawl and sprawl and sprawl. And
We got the Simpsons in the bargain, though.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how direct that causal relationship was, but yes, it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. War against Venezuela, The Simpsons. 28 seasons now or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we're seeing. This is something I've written about as well about the Venezuelan intelligence. Right? It's. I don't want to characterize it too much, but it's been found not credible by Trump's own intelligence community, and it's coming from the right-wing ecosphere. There's literally one specific guy, a former CIA agent, who's out there pushing this stuff and getting amplified primarily on the fringe. But some of it's obviously trickling through, and the guy is being listened to by the Trump administration. So,
and this for our listeners, this is the Venezuelan that we went and blew up this boat that we say had bad people on it.
It predates that, but the boat situation definitely, this alternate parallel intel pipeline is certainly potentially implicated in the I would say clearly illegal bombings of these Venezuelan boats. The original intel that Trump's own intelligence community rejected was that Tren de Aragua, the gang that is here in the U.S., was part of a trained paramilitary-led force sent by Maduro, working with and for Maduro to destabilize the United States, with something like 500 paramilitary trained, 5,000, I think, maybe it's 300 paramilitary, whatever the numbers are. The idea is this is not, a dispersed cellular drug gang. This is a coordinated, organized, top-down led army, secret covert army,
right,
sent by Maduro. And if you look back at the various executive orders that Trump has issued claiming powers to deal with this emergency, that's the scenario that he's claiming with no basis in American intel. So we got a little far afield, but my point is sort of your example about William Randolph Hearst. We continue to play these out. We did it with Iraq, where the mainstream media all went along with it. We did it with Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin. We do it time after time.
The Contras in El Salvador. I mean, that was when I was in college. It's like when anyone is in college, there is one of these going on.
Every generation gets one, Doug.
Right. Like our generation kind of got the Gaza one, but basically it's the shock and horror that the people we were looking to for authoritative insight and information about what was going on are feeding us shit and killing people. It's like, wait a minute, and it keeps happening. So the other one that I would love you to explain a little bit about, because this one seems so ridiculous to me, I can't quite think it through. It sounds to me, or it looks to me, like Hyundai, the South Korean automobile maker who makes the Hyundai cars that we drive around in here. Where America's doing tariffs and wants things manufactured here and all that. So they go to some southern U.S. state and make this or start this big factory that's going to have all these American workers. So they bring in a few hundred South Korean automobile manufacturing workers to train the Americans how to build the Hyundais. And ICE goes in there on some tip and not only arrests these hundreds of South Korean legally here worker trainer people, but stick them in a friggin' giant, awful, crazy gulag prison camp thing for several weeks under semi-torturous conditions, and then finally realize, oh, this was dumb, and release them, and they all go home. Hyundai closes the plant. We lose billions of dollars of business and a zillion trillion jobs, and this is the way we do it. And then the news barely covers it.
When you say the news, I actually think there's been a fair amount of good reporting on it. It just doesn't make the TV news, I think.
It doesn't make the TV.
Right.
Right.
Right. Which tends to drive what the politicians dedicate their time talking about.
Right.
And I actually have to make a calculation, a strategic calculation, kind of every day when I'm putting the newsletter together, which in a cynical silo you could look at as how much will this story hurt the Trump administration?
Look at that.
Is that Wonder Woman?
When she was VP. No, it's fucking
Oh, it's Kamala as Wonder Woman.
Someone got it for us when she got to be VP, but it's funny to have it here. This could be, I'm sure the AIs are scanning it and now. Uh-oh.
But, the cynical view is like, which story will be most damaging to the Trump administration? And in the mainstream media, they're making similar calculations, only they would frame it as what's of most interest, what's most important, what's most impactful or substantive. They're kind of the same thing. And I get a lot of people yelling at me like, the Epstein files is the most important thing. I tend to think it's maybe third most important, both in terms of like its potential to change things and its parallel interpretation as its potential to hurt Donald Trump. I actually don't think there's a lot in there that's really, really damning, at least not beyond the letter. But
no,
my point
it sounds
is,
like the worst case, he's done the same thing as hundreds of other wealthy men.
Also, like the worst thing you could possibly imagine Trump being accused of in there, he's already been publicly accused of.
And he's been publicly accused of,
like,
right.
It's already
or convicted
out there.
Of, right.
Right, and we've already seen, can that kill him? No, apparently not. But a lot of the things that actually can hurt, and that I think in a drip will hurt, don't get covered because they're not big every day. There's always something big every day, something crazy. Charlie Kirk, Jimmy Kimmel, it's blowing up Venezuelan boats. There's always something big. My guess is the economy is going to be the biggest thing.
I want you to understand why these aren't just a silly product that's like a little bit better. It's the guy, Tom, who makes these dryer sheets is thinking about the whole thing. So like the labor that makes it, how they grow the cotton, how they put this together. You can have like a nice, totally organic cotton t-shirt and it says organic and wonderful, but the manufacturing of that thing uses all these chemicals and all this waste and all this crap. They make these things with that perfect little cotton, but then they have a new process to fabricate the cotton so it doesn't put all that crap. And then when you get it, you get this thing that's like not bad. You just put it in the washer and use it as a dryer sheet, and you take it out, you throw it away like with your friggin' compost. It's like and it biodegrades, and it's this kind of perfect cycle of life thing. And that's the difference between this and his change diapers that he's coming out with soon and all these other products, is that they're actually sort of end-to-end part of the regenerative cycle and not just, greenwashed, oh, this is good for the world.
That's beautiful.
Well, and that's my question there. I mean, which is what I wanted to get to with the South Korean thing. So it's
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. So if we lose a potential Hyundai factory, so we have the tariffs that are preventing trade. We're losing factories through what seems like stupidity, but maybe is planned on some level. It feels like, and I don't mean to sound paranoid, but I have friends who talk about this a lot, that the Putin-Orban playbook is to intentionally bankrupt the nation so that you need to privatize things. So you bankrupt the ports, so you privatize them with the Saudi wealth fund. You bankrupt this so that the national parks get bought by private, so the highway system gets bought by private. That's what the fall of the Soviet Union allowed Putin and his oligarchy to do, and it's in theory what would allow Trump and his tech and well, I guess Allison counts as tech too, and his oligarchy to accomplish. Do moves like what happened with the Hyundai plant seem intentional or just stupid?
I go with stupid every time. And for a number of reasons. One, I think is like, I think we've seen that, if they knew how to, and if Donald Trump, I think, my guess is that he grew up seeing certain ways of doing things in the U.S. as sacrosanct. And he thinks he should be able to win within those ways, right? He doesn't, when he plays golf, I think I've said this to you before, he doesn't just walk up to the hole and drop it in and declare that he got a hole in one, right? He pretends. He wants to be seen as, look, I'm playing the golf thing,
So he cheats a little bit, but not the whole thing. He'll just move it in from the rough or take it out of the
right.
Yeah.
And I don't buy the Putin puppet thing. I think we've seen him do too many things that don't.
No, I would say
that.
Putin imitator rather than Putin puppet. Yeah.
Yeah, he clearly,
if anything.
Yeah, he clearly is envious of or jealous of what genuine dictators can do. But I just did a story last week in the fucking news about the Georgia Hyundai plant, which was very interesting to me, and I didn't see get a lot of coverage. There's a lawyer, I believe, representing some of the American or Mexican people who were detained. And the lawyer revealed some information about the warrant that I had not seen elsewhere. The warrant apparently revealed that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, did not know that these South Koreans were going to be there. There was no mention of them in the warrant. They did not come with an interpreter. But what they did have was a quota from Stephen Miller, Deputy White House Chief of Staff, that said, I want 3,000 arrests a day, damn it. So it seems to me that the defense theory here, and my theory, is that they showed up expecting to be able to get 170 Mexicans, whatever were in the warrant, and then they found themselves with a bunch of tie-wearing South Koreans gift-wrapped for them in the boardroom and said, you know what? We'll take one of each.
Right.
That's my guess.
So you're back to stupidity.
I try never to go too far from stupidity.
I know stupidity is an easier enemy. I mean, it's hard to have righteous indignation against stupidity because they're just stupid, but at least it restores my faith in human nature.
I also think it should. I think it should.
Yeah.
But also, and yes, I do think it makes it easier, and it also explains all of the lapses in what you would expect from a competent autocratic regime, totally indifferent to democratic norms, to do. But also, I think I actually try to shy away from motive in a way. Because I think a lot of the news that we do see, especially on TV, a lot of it is driven by kind of what I refer to as motive speculation.
Well, you need motive if you want it to be an Aristotelian story, right? With a character, this is Lalois Egri, who defined drama. The Art of Dramatic Writing said drama is a human will striving towards a goal. That if the audience can't perceive a human will striving towards a goal, they don't understand the story. And I think that's a fundamental truth. So in news, they try to tell the news from the perspective of, here's a human will striving towards this goal. And many times they're very wrong on that. And the facts then come together in a distorted way.
And I think a way that encourages cognitive dissonance. But I do think we have a motive in the sense of what are they trying to do, right? They're trying to get a lot of these people out of the country, right? I think where the news errs, and I think where a lot of the left errs as well, is trying to divine the goodness or badness of the essence of the people involved. And so a lot of things that get surfaced to us as stories are really just exhibits G through J uh, in the case against Stephen Miller's essential evil, goodness or evil, right? It's, haha, look at this. We found a thing. This shows that he's evil, even if that particular thing has no bearing on the material outlook for people's concrete day-to-day lives. It just becomes this sort of evidence gathering and obsessive desire to prove more and more every day. Like there's never enough, right? I would think at this point we wouldn't need more, right? I feel like we've had enough time. I feel like we can send the jury out at this point, but my bigger concern is that blinds us to sort of thinking about why and how are these things happening. Like the fact that Stephen Miller's quotas may very well, according to this defense attorney, have led to the deportation of some 300 South Korean executives and workers who were trying to set up a factory for American employees. So some 2,000 jobs there now are now pushed back indefinitely. We don't know how far, but also South Korean reporting has indicated that there are dozens of other companies that are also tapping the brakes on their own projects all over the place. There are potentially thousands and thousands of American manufacturing jobs, which, by the way, are going down under Trump, right? So if we get caught up in, they hate immigrants, then potentially we're missing out on they're also demolishing the lives of American workers who might have had good paying, potentially even union jobs with benefits and maybe, let's get crazy now, safety measures on the job, on the line, right? So that all of that kind of like trying to like unpack how the media frame things and what motivates their editorial strategies, all of that kind of on some level sort of informs what I try to do every day in the fucking news, which is exactly why, just like you did, I have kept that South Korean story alive.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, because, and maybe this is a nice place to end. It's that, the mainstream media with all of its money and audience ends up reducing the news to the pro wrestling match, right? Who's this baby face? Who's the villain? Who's the that? And working us up into a kind of a mythic frenzy. And the fucking news, for all of its seeming irony, is actually the factual, simple, straightforward, here's what happened. It's almost forcing the opposite, It's like,
well, no, I think I'm very gratified to hear you say that, because that is a pretty like conscious part of the project, right? I think people overestimate the degree of training most journalists get. And I think people underestimate just how intuitive and instinctive a lot of the decision making is. And so just like most people, right, if you see something on social media that's just outrageous and horrific, you go, what the hell is that? And boom, it's won your attention. There's a similar dynamic in America's newsrooms. And so they end up, not even with strategic purposes, they end up elevating outrage and outrageous statements. And now all of a sudden, those are the things we're debating, when the very simple reality is we don't have to. That doesn't have to be what we choose to talk about. And in terms of like progressive progress, we'll do a lot better if we're not talking about those things. If we're talking about things that actually affect people's lives in a way that doesn't make people feel like they have to respond to X, Y, or Z, because of course an outrageous thing happened. Of course, I, the self-appointed defender against outrageous things, must take a stand. You don't. You don't.
Right.
Right? We're not, unless you have some exalted position, like John McCain when a woman came up to him on the campaign line and said Barack Obama is Arab or Muslim, whatever she
Yeah.
said. Like in that case, yes, I agree and I endorse the idea of pushing back. But if it's some rando posting something online, the responsible thing to do is entirely ignore it. And instead of saying we should be talking about X, Y, or Z, just talk about X, Y, or Z. Just do that thing.
Right. Well, let's leave it there with just do that thing and see if Nike sues us for it. But the that really helps and thing, because they just do it, right? We're doing that thing, right? We're doing that thing. Not you do, not that thing you do.
Not
Just
that.
doing
Just do that thing
thing.
you do.
Just do that thing. Just no. Just do that thing. And one of those things is just listen to the fucking news. It's all I do. I've given up on, I won't even say the names of the ones I gave up on, but I gave up on pretty much all of them. And you're like, it's like telling somebody that oh, I did that once when I lived next to this bodega in my 20s. I told them, you realize 98% of the food I eat comes from within these four walls. And they looked at me with horror.
They were horrified, of course. Yes.
The owners of the place were horrified. But I will tell you, 90% of my news comes from you, man. So thanks for that. And please keep it up. Our I would say sister publication, but we're due. So our brother publication, the fucking news, is on Team Human, and Team Human is on the fucking news. So please keep it up, and hopefully see you next month. Let's try to make a regular thing. I always say this kind of thing. Let's make a regular thing, but let's make a regular thing because I love you.
Thanks, Doug.
And thank you for being on Team Human. Team Human is produced by Joshua Chapdelaine. This episode was edited by our editor extraordinaire, Luke Robert Mason. And we're going to just keep trying these different things. If you liked it, if you want to support us, it would be really cool. Go to teamhuman.fm and click on support. Or you could also just watch the ad-filled version and support Everyone's Earth, maker of Kobe dryer sheets. Go to kobedryersheets.com and enter the code RUSH10. That's RUSH and the number 10. And you get 10% off on biodegradable dryer sheets. There's really not a better way to live. Thanks for being on Team Human, our last best hope for peeps.